Hey guys and girls, Bored Now back with you. On this video I'm going to be doing a special movie review. On this video I will be talking about the recent release, The Innocents. So I'll just say I saw this the other day at the cinema. This is really some of my overall thoughts on it. More of a summary than a full-on review. Just saying whether I recommend it or not, why I recommend it, and I'll go into a little bit of the background and some of the spoilers, but since it's a recent film, I won't give too much away. It's a film I might come back to another time, and it's possible me and Rachel might review it at some point, because although it's not like a full-on horror, it definitely has horror elements in it, so maybe enough of a horror feel for us to do it at some point. So yeah, just warning, there will be some general spoilers, but I won't reveal too many big things that happen in the film. It's a Norwegian film. It's about a young girl who moves to a new neighborhood with her family. She has an autistic sister, like sort of the extreme end of autism, where she can barely speak, barely like be on her own type thing. She always needs supervision, so that really plays into the drama. And slowly, as they're trying to settle in, they start to meet other kids around the neighborhood, and there's this one particular kid, this boy, who the young girl takes a sort of a liking to, or like there's sort of an interest there. Not anything like romantic, but there's just this, they get on and stuff, and she's curious by him. It's a new face for her anyway, and they start to experiment with certain little tricks, and it turns out he's got some sort of special powers. He can manipulate objects type thing, and she starts experimenting with that, and she gets more and more interested and drawn into his life, and they obviously hang out a lot more. And there's another girl as well in the same block who it turns out has a certain power as well. She has the power to like read minds, or contact people through like telepathy, and that sort of like it plays into the plot with the autism with her sister, the other girl's sister, where she can actually start to help her, and that's a thing at one point where she actually helps her start to talk, which is a sort of a big thing in the middle of the film. But that's the setup, like them getting to know each other, them discovering they all have sort of special powers, and the drama of how it unfolds, and certain dark, sinister places than the film goes to, because we start to see that these kids all have their own like issues, and that sort of leads to them. One kid in particular, the kid I mentioned who can manipulate things, we see that he has a very rough home life, or he doesn't particularly get on with his mother, and there's definitely like a frustration there and aggression there, and the film flags up quite early that he definitely has a bit of a disturbed sort of like attitude, or is like rebelling, and is kind of taking things a little bit too far with his powers. We see him like bully a cat at one point, which if you're a cat lover is a tough scene to watch, and the girl's kind of telling him not to do it, but he does it anyway. So there's a sense that he's sort of acting up and like abusing his powers for like bad things, and that's kind of like a flag early. Then he quote unquote is going to be like a villain in the film. Obviously it's an extreme to call him that because of his age, because of his circumstances, and certain other things, but they obviously do this thing where things start to spiral a bit out of control, and that's when we sort of get a bit more of a thriller or a bit more of a horror element, where certain things develop and the kids they're sort of fighting for their lives at certain points against him, because things get out of hand. So that's the premise for it, and I think, as you can tell by some of the stuff that I described, it is that sort of thing where they're using like this premise of kids with like special powers, if you like, but using it as a very sort of like adolescent type thing, or like young kids using it as like a metaphor for growing up and certain difficulties. And it definitely feels more like a slow burn drama first, and then kind of a supernatural or horror type movie second. It definitely builds to that stuff in the second half of the film. I liked how they used the girl's like autism as part of that. It's almost like a comment on how someone who has autism is like, can be a bit discarded and a bit, sort of shoved to the side, or just maybe just a little bit looked down on, like maybe they're just seen as other a little bit. So I like that they were playing on that. That was actually like a really sensitive storyline. Like the way they handled it was very, very well done. Very good acting from the girl involved, but it also made you like really respect the role and the job, and how tough that is for like parents of someone with that type condition. There's some really beautiful scenes with the mother and the gal, and you see just how patient they have to be and how caring. And there's a lot of stuff in this film with the drama where it, first of all, the film itself does feel very like slow burning, very naturalistic. You get to know the kids. You really get a sense of like a childlike mind, how difficult certain things can be at a certain age for like kids. Like obviously adjusting to a new location when you're that sort of age is very sort of hard. So the film really works so well because it is so much from their point of view, and you get inside their heads. But there's just so many like nice little touches where it's using like the metaphor of like childhood to play into like this more, as I said, sort of supernatural horror style plot as well. So, but there's definitely stuff that feels like relatable, because I would say the way like the young daughter is with the autism sister, where at first I think it feels like a bit like it's a little bit of a burden, because when she goes out to play she has to take her with her, and at one point early in the film like she leaves her on like the swings, and because like as far as she knows she can just stay there and she won't move for ages, and she tells her not to move, and she sort of goes off with like her new friend, and obviously that stuff's very hard at that age, but it's sort of, you do understand it as well. You do understand how if that becomes your life, then that can be a little bit of a burden, and also it's very like realistic than someone like that moving to a new neighbourhood, especially at a young age like that, would look for other people like to hang out with, new faces. So it's sort of quite clever the way the film transitions that into her playing around with this other kid, being quite excited to like hang out with him and look forward to that, but then being shocked by his actions and how extremes they are, like the stuff with the cat. So that stuff was all very like nicely built up for, like each scene is sort of plays out quite naturalistic, and that was impressive, like the transition into like the darker stuff and the way the film plants seeds, and this kid isn't quite right, and there's going to be dark stuff going on with him later. There's a very dark scene with like his mother and a development there, sort of. I think that's about in the middle of the film. So really good drama. I think that's a good way to describe it, is that although it has like inevitably it has like this X-Men feel to it, just in the premise itself, and obviously some horror vibes as well. Is then it's almost like the more naturalistic drama version of that, where things, as I said, slowly play out and you get to know the characters. It's very, you get a sense of the neighbourhood and the mood and how authentic everything is, and just really nice direction all round, and a style and a mood to it. But then as it develops and you get into that stuff more, then that's another bonus to the film. That's a great payoff, where you do then suddenly get these really tense horror moments where, because it's spent time building to this stuff, there's stakes to that stuff. You care about what happens with these kids, and when things go as dark and, you know, as tense as they do, and it's impressive how dark it gets at points, considering we're dealing with such young characters. Then, as I said, stakes on that stuff, so you are worried about, oh my god, what's going to happen, and it's done in a very convincing way where things just spiral out of control. As I said, it's sort of a funny sort of movie where it's hard not to escape the X-Men style feel to it, almost X-Men but for youngsters in a way, young children, sort of pre-teens. I think at least two of them are. But anyway, I think you have that in the back of your mind, that maybe, because there are certain scenes later on where you almost have a sort of a standoff in a way between the good and the bad side. That's probably the wrong way to phrase it, because it's not that sort of film, but obviously those scenes maybe have that bit of feel. So it's credit to the film that then it never feels like a flashy over the top moment. It always feels quite grounded and naturalistic, and obviously I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing it the other way if that's what works for the film, but this is not that film. This is very different, and because we've seen that other kind of film so many times, it's actually refreshing to have this be more of a sort of a coming of age style drama with these very relatable sort of themes and characters. But then on the other hand, you have a satisfying genre feel to it as well. You have tense moments, you have atmosphere, you have sort of stakes and moments that are a bit playful as well. So it definitely gets the right blend for me. And another thing to recommend it is just how good the young cast are. The four main characters and their actors, they are really well cast. They're very good. They're very naturalistic, but they're also, there's a real range to them, because obviously they go through some tough stuff in this film. So it's impressive just how good those actors are. They really carry the film, because obviously if their performances were off, then it might affect the film. It might affect the drama, but they're pretty much on point. They're great finds, great casting, and yeah, it's a funny sort of thing. Also, the diversity of it is really good. Then you have obviously actors of colour. I think almost just having an autism character, I think that plays into it as well. It really shows the diversity of it, and I think that's probably intentional, because they're all living in this same block of flats. So I think it's maybe to show, that this is a diverse world now. This is the shape of things, and it's a Norwegian film, I'll say that. So that's something that's worth mentioning. And now I know one of the people involved in it was also involved in a film called Thelma a few years ago, which I enjoyed a fair bit as well. I'd recommend checking that out. But yeah, so that's my, a few spoilers, but not too many in there for The Innocents, and a film I'll probably return to another time. So I definitely recommend The Innocents, and I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. So I'll be back with more reviews soon, guys. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.